On a crisp autumn morning in 1960s Chicago, the light slanted through the windows of a modest brick house on the south side, illuminating the pages of a well-worn science book in the hands of a young girl. Mae Jemison, barely 7 years old, sat cross-legged on the living room floor, her eyes tracing the illustrations of distant galaxies and swirling nebulae. The room was quiet except for the occasional hum of traffic outside and the soft footsteps of her mother, Dorothy, moving about the kitchen. This was a home where curiosity was not just encouraged but celebrated, a place where art supplies mingled with chemistry sets and jazz records played alongside educational television programs. Mae's father, Charlie, a maintenance supervisor, often brought home discarded electronics for her to dismantle and explore, nurturing a hands-on understanding of how things worked. In this warm, intellectually rich environment, the seeds of a Renaissance mind were sown, one that would grow to embrace the vastness of space and the intricacies of human culture with equal passion. Mae's childhood was a tapestry woven with diverse threads of interest. She did not merely dream of the stars, she danced among them in her imagination, choreographing stories that blended science and art. After school, she would rush to the local library, her small fingers pulling books on astronomy, anthropology, and mythology from the shelves, devouring them with an insatiable appetite. Her parents, recognizing her boundless energy, enrolled her in dance classes where she learned modern, African, and ballet styles, disciplines that taught her the value of practice and expression. At the same time, she sketched and painted, her artwork often depicting futuristic scenes of space travel and alien worlds. This was not a child who saw boundaries between disciplines. For Mae, science was a form of beauty, and art a method of inquiry. She once recalled watching the Apollo missions on television, her face bathed in the flickering blue light, feeling a mix of awe and frustration as she noticed the absence of women among the astronauts. In that moment, a quiet determination took root. She would not just witness history, she would help shape it. The South Side of Chicago in the 1960s was a community of resilience and aspiration, where neighbors looked out for one another and education was prized as a pathway to broader horizons. Mae attended local public schools, where her teachers quickly recognized her exceptional aptitude. She was the kind of student who asked probing questions, who stayed after class to discuss the mechanics of rockets or the biology of cells. Her mother, an elementary school teacher, supplemented her formal education with lessons in patience and perseverance, often reminding her that intelligence alone was not enough. One needed character and courage. Dorothy's influence was profound. She taught Mae to see learning as a lifelong adventure, not merely a series of tests. On weekends, the family visited museums and planetariums, where Mae would press her face against the glass of exhibits, imagining herself floating among the celestial bodies projected on the domed ceilings. These outings were not just entertainment, they were pilgrimages that reinforced her belief that the universe was hers to explore. As Mae grew older, her academic excellence became increasingly evident. She excelled in mathematics and science, subjects that many girls, especially Black girls, were subtly discouraged from pursuing at the time. But Mae was never one to accept limitations. She remembered a kindergarten teacher who asked what she wanted to be when she grew up. When Mae replied, "a scientist," the teacher suggested she meant a nurse. The comment stung, not because there was anything wrong with nursing, but because it revealed a narrowness of expectation that Mae refused to internalize. Instead, she channeled her frustration into fuel, studying harder and speaking louder. By the time she entered Morgan Park High School, she was known for her sharp mind and her eclectic passions. She joined the science club, but also the dance troupe. She debated philosophy while mastering chemistry equations. Her bedroom was a reflection of her polymathic soul, a telescope pointed out the window, a microscope on the desk, and a pair of well-worn ballet slippers tucked beside the bookshelf. The 1970s brought a shifting cultural landscape, and Mae was acutely aware of the social movements swirling around her. The civil rights struggle and the push for gender equality were not abstract concepts. They were lived realities that shaped her worldview. She read the works of Black thinkers and scientists, searching for role models who looked like her. She found inspiration in the stories of Katherine Johnson and the hidden figures of NASA, but she also yearned for a visible presence in space. Her determination to see women astronauts became a quiet mantra, a personal mission that guided her choices. When she graduated from high school in 1973 as a consistent honor student, her path was clear. She would pursue a career that blended her love for science with her desire to serve humanity. The city of Chicago, with its harsh winters and warm-hearted communities, had given her a foundation of grit and grace. She carried with her the memory of those early mornings, the light on the pages, and the unwavering support of a family that believed in the boundless potential of a curious girl. Mae's journey was not just about personal achievement, it was about representation and possibility. In her quiet moments, she reflected on the importance of seeing oneself in the stars. She understood that her success could open doors for others, that her presence in a laboratory or a spacecraft could challenge entrenched stereotypes. This sense of purpose added depth to her studies and warmth to her ambitions. She was not merely accumulating knowledge, she was preparing to be a bridge between worlds, the scientific and the artistic, the terrestrial and the cosmic. Her early life in Chicago thus stands as a testament to the power of a supportive environment, the beauty of interdisciplinary curiosity, and the quiet strength of a girl who looked up at the night sky and saw not just lights, but a destiny waiting to be claimed. The California sun cast long, golden shadows across the palm-lined paths of Stanford University as Mae Jemison stepped onto campus in 1973, a 16-year-old freshman with a suitcase and an unshakable resolve. The architecture was a blend of mission-style red-tiled roofs and modern concrete, a visual paradox that mirrored her own ambitions. She had arrived to study chemical engineering, a field so dominated by white men that she often found herself the only black woman in her lecture halls, a solitary figure in a sea of faces that sometimes looked at her with surprise, sometimes with skepticism. The labs were cavernous rooms filled with the sharp smell of chemicals and the hum of machinery, where she meticulously pipetted solutions and analyzed data, her hands steady and her mind sharp. But Jemison refused to be defined by a single discipline. She also pursued a degree in African and African American studies, diving into the history, culture, and politics of the diaspora. Her days were a rigorous dance between the cold logic of thermodynamics and the rich, complex narratives of Black identity. At night, she would often be found in the dance studio, the worn wooden floor cool beneath her feet, as she rehearsed modern dance routines, her body releasing the tensions of the day through movement. This was not a balancing act for her, it was an integrated life. She saw engineering as a tool for solving human problems, and the humanities as a lens for understanding which problems needed solving. The challenges, however, were real and constant. Professors questioned her abilities, peers excluded her from study groups, and the weight of representing an entire race and gender pressed heavily on her shoulders. She later recalled walking into a class and having a professor ask if she was in the right room. The sting of such moments was sharp, but she metabolized it into fuel. She drew strength from the Black Student Union, a vibrant community that provided solidarity and a space to breathe. The low, modern buildings of the Black House became a refuge, filled with the sounds of Motown and passionate debate. She graduated in 1977 with not one, but 2 Bachelor of Science degrees, a testament to her intellectual stamina. The next step was Cornell University Medical College, a decision that surprised some but made perfect sense to her. Medicine, she believed, was the ultimate intersection of science and humanity. The Gothic spires and ivy-covered walls of Cornell, set against the gray, brooding skies of upstate New York, offered a stark contrast to Stanford's sun-drenched campus. Here, she immersed herself in the grueling study of anatomy, pharmacology, and pathology. The anatomy lab, with its harsh fluorescent lights and the faint, sweet smell of formaldehyde, was a place of profound learning where she developed a deep respect for the human body's intricate machinery. She spent her clinical rotations in the bustling, chaotic corridors of New York City hospitals, where the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead and the air was thick with urgency. It was in these crowded wards, treating patients from all walks of life, that she saw the raw face of health disparities. She traveled to Cuba during a medical mission and later to a Cambodian refugee camp in Thailand, experiences that seared into her a global perspective on health. After earning her MD in 1981, she returned to Los Angeles for her residency, then set up a general practice. She chose not the lucrative path of a specialty, but the frontline work of a family doctor, serving a diverse community in a modest clinic. The building was a simple, low-slung structure with a waiting room filled with worn magazines and the quiet hope of patience. She treated everything from childhood fevers to chronic diseases, but she also educated, advocating for preventive care and nutrition. For Jemison, medicine was not just about prescriptions, it was about listening, understanding, and empowering. The engineer in her saw systems that needed fixing, and the humanist in her saw the stories behind every symptom. She was building a foundation of service, brick by brick, unaware that the stars were slowly aligning for a different kind of launch. The West African sun cast long shadows across the tin-roofed clinic in Freetown, Sierra Leone, as Mae Jemison began another day of service. The air was thick with humidity and the scent of tropical flora, a world away from the sterile hospitals of Los Angeles, where she had completed her medical training. Here, in the Peace Corps, she was not just a doctor but a healer, an engineer of makeshift solutions, and a student of a rich cultural tapestry. Her days started early, often with a cup of strong local coffee as she reviewed patient charts by the soft glow of a kerosene lamp. The clinic was modest, its walls adorned with hand-painted health education posters, and the waiting area filled with the murmur of Creole and Mend languages. Mae moved through her rounds with a calm, focused demeanor, her stethoscope a familiar weight around her neck, listening not just to heartbeats, but to the stories of the people she served. She treated everything from malaria to malnutrition, her chemical engineering background proving unexpectedly useful when she had to repair a broken autoclave or design a better water filtration system from local materials. Beyond the clinic walls, Jemison's responsibilities extended to managing the healthcare of Peace Corps volunteers and U.S. Embassy personnel scattered across the region. This meant long journeys on dusty roads in a rugged Land Rover, passing through villages where children would wave and shout greetings. The landscape shifted from lush coastal plains to dense rainforests, the canopy filtering sunlight into dappled patterns on the red earth. In these remote outposts, she conducted health assessments, gave vaccinations, and trained volunteers on disease prevention. The work demanded resourcefulness. When supplies ran low, she learned to improvise with traditional remedies and local knowledge, always respecting the delicate balance between modern medicine and indigenous healing practices. This cross-cultural exchange deepened her understanding of global health, revealing how social and environmental factors shaped well-being. She saw firsthand the resilience of communities facing resource scarcity, and it planted a seed of conviction that technology and science must be accessible and adaptable to all. One of her most significant contributions was her involvement in vaccine research, particularly for hepatitis B and rabies. Working in collaboration with international health organizations, she helped conduct field studies that required meticulous record-keeping and patient follow-up. The process was painstaking, tracking individuals across nomadic communities, ensuring proper cold chain storage for vaccines in tropical heat, and building trust with local leaders. Mae often sat under the shade of a baobab tree, explaining the purpose of the trials to community elders, her voice steady and respectful. These conversations were not just about medicine, they were about partnership. She listened to their concerns, learned about their traditional beliefs, and found common ground. This period honed her ability to communicate complex scientific ideas in simple, relatable terms, a skill that would later define her public persona. The experience also reinforced her belief that science is a universal language, but it must be spoken with cultural humility. Life in the Peace Corps was not without its challenges. The isolation could be profound, and the emotional toll of witnessing preventable suffering was heavy. Yet, Jemison found solace in the vibrant culture around her. In the evenings, she might join a local dance circle, her body moving to the rhythm of drums under a canopy of stars, the same stars she had dreamed of traveling to as a child. She learned to cook local dishes, like cassava leaf stew, and found joy in the simple act of sharing a meal with new friends. These moments of connection were as vital to her as any medical procedure, grounding her in the present and fueling her empathy. She often reflected on how her dual identity as a scientist and an artist allowed her to navigate these worlds seamlessly, drawing on her dance training to understand the physicality of labor in the fields, or her love of art to appreciate the intricate patterns of local textiles. As her service drew to a close, Jemison carried with her a transformed perspective. The Peace Corps had been a crucible, forging her clinical skills into a broader, more holistic approach to problem-solving. She had learned to see healthcare not as a series of individual treatments, but as an ecosystem intertwined with culture, environment, and economy. This global lens would later inform her work in space, where she viewed Earth as a single, fragile system. The experience also solidified her commitment to serving underserved communities, a thread that would run through her entire career. When she boarded the plane back to the United States, she was not just a doctor returning home. She was a global citizen with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to tackle even greater challenges. The legacy of those years in West Africa is often overshadowed by her later achievements, but it was there that the foundations of her interdisciplinary vision were laid. In the quiet moments, watching a sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple over the Atlantic, or listening to the laughter of children outside her clinic, she understood that exploration was not just about reaching new frontiers, but about deepening connections right here on Earth. This chapter of her life was a testament to the power of stepping into the unknown, armed with knowledge and compassion, and allowing oneself to be changed by the journey. The early morning light streamed through the windows of the Johnson Space Center in Houston, casting long, purposeful shadows across the training facility. Mae Jemison moved with quiet determination through the mock-up modules, her reflection flickering in the polished surfaces of the shuttle simulators. It was 1987, and she had just been selected as one of 15 new astronaut candidates from a pool of over 2,000 applicants. The air hummed with the quiet intensity of preparation, a blend of recycled oxygen and the faint scent of electronics. For Jemison, this was the culmination of a childhood dream, but also the beginning of an arduous journey. She immersed herself in the rigorous training program, which included everything from survival training in the wilderness to mastering the complex systems of the space shuttle. Her days were a blur of classroom instruction on orbital mechanics, space physiology, and shuttle engineering, interspersed with physical conditioning and water survival drills in the giant neutral buoyancy laboratory, where the water's blue depths mimicked the weightlessness of space. As the only African-American woman in her class, Jemison navigated the environment with her characteristic blend of grace and resilience. She was acutely aware of the historical weight she carried, but she focused on the work, earning the respect of her peers through her competence and collaborative spirit. The training was designed to push candidates to their limits, both mentally and physically. She learned to fly T-38 jets, her hands steady on the controls as she soared above the Texas landscape, the patchwork of fields and cities shrinking below. In the simulators, she practiced emergency procedures until they became second nature, her voice calm as she called out checklists during simulated engine failures. The architecture of the space program, the vast hangars, the towering vehicle assembly building, the sleek lines of the shuttle orbiters became her daily backdrop, a constant reminder of the audacity of human exploration. After 5 years of preparation, the day finally arrived. On September 12, 1992, Jemison boarded the Space Shuttle Endeavour as a mission specialist for STS-47, a cooperative mission between the United States and Japan. The launch pad at Kennedy Space Center was bathed in the harsh Florida sun, the shuttle gleaming white against the azure sky. As the countdown reached 0, she felt the thunderous roar of the engines, a controlled explosion propelling her into history. The ascent was a sensory overload: the vibration, the pressure, the sudden release into the silent, velvety blackness of space. When the main engines cut off, she unstrapped and floated to the window, her breath catching at the sight of Earth suspended below, a swirling marble of blue, white, and brown. In that moment, she became the first African-American woman to travel into space, a milestone that resonated far beyond the confines of the orbiter. During the 8-day mission, Jemison was responsible for conducting a series of life science experiments, many of which she had helped design. She worked in the Space Lab module, a pressurized laboratory nestled in the shuttle's payload bay, where she investigated bone cell research, frog embryo development in microgravity, and biofeedback systems. The weightless environment transformed everyday actions into delicate ballets. She moved through the narrow passages with practiced ease, her hair floating in a halo around her head. One of her most notable experiments involved studying motion sickness and the body's adaptation to space, a common challenge for astronauts. She meticulously monitored her own physiological responses and those of her crewmates, contributing valuable data that would aid future long-duration missions. The shuttle's interior was a maze of white panels, blue handrails, and the soft hum of life support systems, bathed in a constant, flat light from fluorescent tubes. Beyond her scientific duties, Jemison embraced her role as a communicator and educator. She carried with her a poster of the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, a nod to her passion for the arts, and a photo of pioneering aviator Bessie Coleman, who had inspired her as a child. In a live broadcast from orbit, she spoke to students around the world, her voice clear and enthusiastic as she demonstrated the wonders of weightlessness and explained the importance of science. She saw the mission not just as a personal achievement, but as a platform to ignite curiosity in young minds, particularly those from underrepresented communities. Her presence in space was a powerful symbol, challenging stereotypes and expanding the vision of what a scientist and explorer could look like. The crew worked in harmony, a microcosm of international cooperation, sharing meals of rehydrated food and gazing together at the breathtaking sunrises that occurred every 90 minutes. As Endeavour glided back to Earth, touching down on the runway at Kennedy Space Center with a puff of tire smoke, Jemison emerged to a world that had been watching. The mission was a resounding success, completing 126 orbits and advancing our understanding of life in microgravity. For Jemison, the journey was transformative, but she knew it was just one step. She had broken a celestial ceiling, but her eyes were already on the next horizon. The experience solidified her belief in the interconnectedness of all knowledge, science, art, culture, and the need for a more inclusive approach to exploration. The 8 days she spent off the planet were a testament to the power of perseverance, and a reminder that the sky is not the limit when there are footprints on the moon. Imagine a quiet morning in Houston, Texas, in the early 1990s. The sky is a soft wash of pale blue, and the last stars are fading. In a sunlit room filled with books, artwork, and a globe, Mae Jemison sits at a desk, her eyes reflecting both the vastness of space she has seen and the intricate details of a new blueprint. After her historic journey aboard Endeavour, she did not simply rest on her laurels. Instead, she began to weave together the threads of her life: medicine, engineering, art, and a deep curiosity about human society into a tapestry of innovation that would reach far beyond the blue marble of Earth. In 1993, Jemison founded the Jemison Group, a technology consulting firm that integrated sociocultural issues into the design of engineering and science projects. The firm's work focused on improving daily life through technology, such as developing a satellite-based telecommunications system to improve healthcare delivery in developing nations. She also explored the use of advanced technologies for sustainable development, always emphasizing that technology must be designed with an understanding of the people it serves. The office itself was a reflection of her mind, a place where African sculptures stood beside computer terminals and where dance rehearsals might follow a business meeting. Jemison's belief in the unity of arts and sciences became a public mission. She often said that the analytical skills of a scientist and the creative intuition of an artist are not opposites, but complements. To prove this, she founded the international science camp The Earth We Share in 1994. Held annually, the camp brought together high school students from around the world to solve global problems using scientific methods and creative thinking. In a typical scene, students might be found in a sun-dappled forest, collecting samples, then later in a studio, painting their visions of a sustainable future. Jemison moved among them, her presence calm and inspiring, reminding them that a hypothesis and a poem both begin with observation and wonder. Her advocacy extended to the highest levels. In 1999, she accepted a position as a professor of environmental studies at Dartmouth College, where she taught courses on technology and development. She also served on numerous corporate and nonprofit boards, including the National Academy of Sciences Committee on Space Biology and Medicine. In every role, she championed science literacy, arguing that a scientifically literate public is essential for democracy. She often appeared in documentaries and public lectures, her voice steady and warm, explaining complex ideas with the clarity of a teacher and the passion of an explorer. In 2012, Jemison was selected to lead the 100-Year Starship Project, a joint initiative between NASA and the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. The goal was audacious: to ensure that the capability for human interstellar travel exists within the next century. Under her guidance, the project was not just about propulsion systems or life support, but about the human and cultural dimensions of leaving our solar system. She convened symposia where physicists discussed warp drives, but also where ethicists debated the rights of future generations and artists imagined the aesthetics of a starship. The project's headquarters, a modern facility filled with models of spacecraft and abstract art, embodied her interdisciplinary vision. Throughout these years, Jemison remained a visible and vocal proponent of diversity in STEM. She authored books for children, spoke at countless schools, and used her own story to show that a Black woman could be an astronaut, a doctor, an engineer, and a dancer. She did not present her path as easy, but as possible with determination and support. In her memoir, she wrote about the beauty of a life that refuses to be categorized, where one can love the precision of a chemical equation and the freedom of a jazz improvisation. Her home, a serene space filled with mementos from her travels and shelves of well-worn books, was a testament to a life lived fully at the intersections. Today, Mae Jemison continues to push boundaries. She leads initiatives that link space exploration with solving Earth's problems, such as using satellite data for climate resilience. Her message remains consistent: the future belongs to those who can draw from multiple wells of knowledge. In a world often divided by specialization, she stands as a reminder that the greatest breakthroughs come when we connect the seemingly unconnected. Her legacy is not just in the record books, but in the countless students she has inspired to look up at the night sky and see not just stars, but possibilities. Picture a quiet morning in Houston, the soft Texas sun casting long shadows across the Johnson Space Center campus. Inside a modest office, Mae Jemison sits at her desk, surrounded by flight manuals and personal notebooks filled with ideas that reach far beyond orbital mechanics. It is 1993, just months after her historic journey aboard Endeavour. The air is still, but a restlessness stirs within her, a sense that her path must now diverge from the structured corridors of NASA. She gazes out the window at the vast blue sky, the same sky she once pierced, and contemplates a future where science, art, and social impact intertwine more freely. This moment of introspection marks the beginning of a transition that would puzzle some, inspire many, and ultimately define her legacy as a boundary-breaking visionary. Jemison's decision to leave NASA after only one spaceflight surprised the public and sparked quiet speculation. She had achieved what few could dream, becoming the first African-American woman in space, yet she chose to walk away at the peak of her astronaut career. In her own words, she sought broader challenges that NASA's structured environment could not offer. She later explained that she had always been a person of multiple interests, and the astronaut role, while extraordinary, was just one facet of her identity. Some internal reports hinted at friction with the agency's culture, suggesting that her outspoken advocacy for interdisciplinary approaches and her direct communication style may have clashed with institutional norms. However, Jemison herself consistently framed her departure as a positive, self-directed move, a step toward integrating science with social responsibility, arts, and entrepreneurship. She refused to be defined solely by her spaceflight, instead insisting that her mission was not to be a symbol of diversity alone, but to use her platform to reshape how we think about science and humanity. The years following NASA revealed a woman unbounded by conventional career paths. She founded the Jemison Group, a technology consulting firm that explored how advanced technologies could be woven into everyday life, particularly in underserved communities. Her work often focused on projects like satellite-based telemedicine for remote areas, blending her medical expertise with her engineering background. She also took on the role of professor at Dartmouth College, teaching environmental studies and emphasizing the interconnectedness of natural and social systems. In these settings, she moved with a calm authority, her voice steady and measured, whether she was explaining complex systems or discussing the importance of dance and creativity in scientific thinking. Her daily life became a tapestry of lectures, design sessions, and quiet moments of writing, all aimed at building bridges between disciplines that society often keeps separate. One of her most ambitious endeavors was leading the 100-year Starship Project, a DARPA-funded initiative to foster the capability for human interstellar travel within a century. Here, Jemison's interdisciplinary philosophy shone brightest. She insisted that such a monumental goal required not just advances in propulsion and life support, but radical rethinking of economics, culture, and ethics. Under her guidance, the project convened scientists, artists, philosophers, and engineers, creating a space where a poet's insight was as valued as an engineer's calculation. She often spoke of the need for radical leaps in our thinking, drawing from her own life as a dancer, doctor, and astronaut to illustrate how creativity fuels innovation. The project's legacy is not a Starship blueprint, but a network of thinkers committed to long-term, inclusive problem-solving. Education remained a cornerstone of her advocacy. She created The Earth We Share, an international science camp that brought together teenagers from diverse backgrounds to solve global challenges using critical thinking and cross-cultural collaboration. The camp's curriculum was a direct reflection of Jemison's belief that science literacy is not just about facts, but about understanding how to use knowledge ethically and creatively. She believed that every child, regardless of background, deserved to see themselves as a potential scientist, and she worked tirelessly to dismantle the stereotypes that narrow our collective imagination. Her approach was never loud or confrontational. Rather, she led by example, her presence a quiet testament to what becomes possible when we refuse to compartmentalize our passions. Reflecting on her journey, one sees a pattern of resilience forged not through dramatic struggle, but through consistent, graceful determination. The controversy of her NASA departure fades in the light of her constructive response. She did not retreat or complain, but built new platforms that amplified her values. Her legacy is not merely that she broke a racial and gender barrier in space, though that remains historically significant. It is that she redefined what a scientist, an astronaut, and a leader can be, a person who integrates art and analysis, who serves communities while reaching for the stars, and who turns personal transitions into opportunities for broader impact. Today, her name inspires not just because she soared above Earth, but because she returned to Earth to cultivate a more imaginative, inclusive, and interconnected world. As the sun sets over a different horizon, perhaps at a university campus where a young girl reads about Mae Jemison, the legacy continues. That girl might be a dancer who loves chemistry, or a poet fascinated by planets, and she will find in Jemison a mirror for her own multifaceted dreams. The lesson is clear: Perseverance is not always about staying the course, but sometimes about having the courage to change it, to seek alignment between one's inner truth and outer work. Jemison's story reminds us that the greatest contributions often come from those who dare to be whole, who refuse to leave any part of themselves behind. Her voice, calm and assured, echoes through the years, urging us to look up at the night sky not with mere wonder, but with the intent to understand, to create, and to care.